Welcome back to page 121 and continuing my Petrification week. We're going to go into the Dungeon Master's Guide for something. It's going to be an item that causes petrification in two different ways. And you're saying, wait a minute. If you're a long-time viewer of mine, you're going to say you covered all the magical eyes in a previous video. I did. I'm going to take a deeper dive just into the eyes of petrification a little bit, just to bring those out. And I'll put a link to the other video I did on eyes. It was about a year or two ago. And then you can catch me if I contradict myself in some way. So there you go. But eyes of petrification, totally indistinguishable from any other magical cusps. The effect of donning these lenses is instantaneous. The wearer is turned to stone. Note, 25% of these devices work as the gaze of a basilisk does, including reflection of the weapon, turning the gazer to stone. So basically, the video I did before just worked with all the magic eyes right here, which is Charming, Eagle, Minute Seeing, and Petrification. Petrification is pretty straightforward. It's a cursed magic item. It's not worth any experience points. And if you put these cusps in your eyes, these are contact lenses for all purposes. Why you would think in a D&D type milieu to take these little cusps and put them in your eyes, I don't know, but I just assume that maybe there's some kind of compulsion with it or something, and then hand wave magic, something. But you put these in your eyes, and bam, you're turned to stone, which means, of course, that the cusps are only good for one use. So that's a cursed item to turn you to stone. I have used them. I've used them as the cursed item, turning to stone. I did that in Valpurgis a few years ago. I also put it into a game I was doing at that old club I used to be in the early 80s. I put them in as a magic item I used to throw cursed items in now and again to kind of keep those players on their toes. That was not my normal group, although I did develop a normal group through that club that played with me every week, or every month rather. But we would end up, most of my games, I would have 12 to 14 people at the table. So every once in a while I just lob in a cursed magic item to keep them on their toes. But so they'll turn you to stone instantaneously, and then you need a stone to flesh to come back. Or 25% of the time, you get the gaze of the basilisk, including looking at your reflection. This is kind of interesting because don't do it. This is experience talking. Don't do it. The eyes of petrification, if you give them to the player character to work as the basilisk gaze, or basilisk, however you say it, the problem becomes that it's a power they can use all the time. There's no limit on it. There's no set time. You're going to have this guy walking around, zapping people, turning them to stone. And I had that. I gave him out in my home campaign years ago. This, I think, was in the early 90s. And at first it was fine. The player would go in. He was a fighter. And he would go in and he'd get into melee. And then he'd say, I'm going to lock eyes with them. And they'd lock eyes and they'd have to make a saving throw versus petrification. Anybody who's done any kind of martial arts or anything like that knows that if you're doing it right, a lot of what you're looking at is your opponent's head, face, eyes, that kind of thing, depending on the situation. There's some martial artists screaming at the TV saying, no, you look at center of mass, and I get that. But you're also going to be searching a little bit on their face for intent and where they're going and things like that. And the eyes can often betray a move before it happens. That was what this guy was counting on. He'd get in, he'd melee with them, then he'd lock eyes with his opponent, and they'd have to make a saving throw or be turned to stone. And if they made their saving throw, I ruled that they didn't even know anything happened because there's no feeling with it or anything. They don't get sluggish or slightly turned to stone. It's an all or nothing thing. So this guy had kind of made it an art form. He would get into the melee. He would lock eyes with the opponent. If the opponent failed the saving throw, then the opponent would be turned to stone. One time, he had told me he was locking eyes and his action was coming right up. The opponent failed to save. So I ruled that as he was swinging the sword, the command had already gone to swing the sword at the guy who was now stone. So he hit it, and I made the sword roll a saving throw, but it made the saving throw. But he did cut off a good chunk of the guy. So if the guy did get healed, he had a big piece missing out of his side. So that ended up being kind of a thing, too. Had that sword failed, of course, it would have shattered. So kind of an interesting item. One of the very few magic items that actually turns people to stone. I didn't go into the Encyclopedia Magica books to look for anything like that, but the just in the Dungeon Master's Guide and Unearthed Arcana, there aren't a ton of magic items that will turn your opponent to stone. Anyway, back to the Eyes of Petrification. Avoid giving these out. Do not give them out with the 25% that the person's walking around with a basilisk gaze. If you do give them out, I would recommend putting it on a number of times per day. 1, 2, 3 times a day. Whether the opponent makes the save or not. That is how I would do it. But that being said, I do not have anybody in any of my games that is using Eyes of Petrification currently. And I plan to keep it that way. If you are going to give this guy out, I would not give it out before, say, 8th or 9th level. You don't want a low-level character walking around stoning people. On the other hand, maybe you're going to build a campaign around that, so it's a good idea for you. It's not anything I would recommend. But that's all I've got today on Eyes of Petrification. Tomorrow's video will be the last of this series. Please let me know how you like this kind of themed week I'm doing. I won't always do a week, but I might do some themed videos back-to-back, and we'll see how it goes. And if you're one of my people that watches my Traveler videos, let me know any theme weeks for Traveler that you're interested in doing. I can do those too. So, and please take a look at the Patreon. Help me out there. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Let's grow the channel. But that's all I've got today on page 121. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.